Hey fifth graders, welcome to week 5 of our distance learning. This week we are going to be jumping back into the Wonders Workbook where we will be reading an example of historical fiction. We will also be looking at homophones, summarizing what we've read, and finding the theme. Along with our Wonders Workbook, I've also assigned you a page that helps you practice between finding the main idea and finding theme, because sometimes you all have a hard time with that. Throughout this video, I will explain all of those skills. I'll walk you through all of them, and I will walk you through your workbook pages for this week like I've been doing in the past. So make sure that you stay tuned for all of that and use the timestamps in the description to find what you're looking for if you need help or need to go back and see it again. I have a little something extra that I'm asking for you to complete this week. This week, I have emailed your parents a link to a survey or a questionnaire that is for you to complete. It's not a quiz. There are no right or wrong answers. It's just something for you to let me know how things are going for you. I haven't been able to communicate with a lot of you or really talk to you, so this is the next best thing to us being able to talk face to face. Be honest, let me know how things are going, because I really need to know how life is for you right now, because I don't get to talk to you and I miss that a lot. So if you can do it, please do it. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and get into our skills review. You have learned about homophones for at least the past 2 or 3 years, so this should be a review, should not be anything new. Homophones are 2 words that sound the same but have a different spelling and a different meaning. Hopefully that should be ringing some bells in your mind. So why is it important that you learn about homophones and that you continue to remember them and keep them fresh in your brain? Knowing homophones will help you understand the context of texts that include homophones. So it will help you to figure out the meaning of what is going on in a particular situation that you are reading about. It will help you be an accurate writer and use the correct spelling in your writing. So if you're writing about something, you want to make sure that you use the correct homophone based on what you are writing about. And being aware of them, of the ones that are common, will help you to do that. And it can help you become a humorous writer, and you can create puns and jokes that use homophones. So if you aren't really aware of what puns are, this is something that you could look up. They're typically kind of like a corny joke that just helps you be more creative and have more of a sense of humor in your writing. So what are some examples of homophones? Pear, like a pair of shoes, and pear, like the fruit. Flower and flower, flower that you bake with, a pretty flower that you would see growing outside. Hair, like the hair on your head. Hare, as in a rabbit. Sail, what would be on a boat, a sail on a boat, if you're going sailing. Or sale, like your parents might be putting your house up for sale. These are just a few examples. I'm sure you can think of a lot more that you've learned over the past few years. Make sure that you understand what homophones are and that you keep them in your arsenal and in your memory so that you can use them when you are reading and writing. All right, fifth graders, let's review our genre of historical fiction. If you remember a few weeks back in our Wonders Workbook, we read a different example of historical fiction. That one focused on a family during the Great Depression of the 1930s. This example is going to be a little bit different. Before we get into talking about the example, let's talk about what historical fiction is. It zooms in on one specific event in history, explores it from one or more characters' point of view perspective. So it's kind of a mixture of nonfiction because it has to do with a real time in history, and a mixture of fiction because different parts of the story, different story elements are going to be made up or fictional. So let's talk about the different story elements and how you are going to see them in historical fiction. Characters. Some are invented, some are factual. So our factual characters are going to be key figures, presidents, important leaders in the military, in our government, important people who made things happen, inventors. Then you're also going to have your invented characters. This is going to be your main character most of the time. the character that you're getting to see their feelings and that is experiencing the events of the plot. Your setting takes place in authentic location, so a real location and definite time period. In this example, for this week in our Wonders book, Shipped Out, the time period is World War II. Okay? World War II is our time period that we are looking at. Plot, mixture of factual and fictional events. World War II, it happened. Okay? It is a real factual event. A lot of the elements of your plot this week are going to be based on how life was during World War II for Americans that were fighting overseas and for those who were left behind at home. The fictional events is going to be your more specific information, your problem, and your solution in the plot. Conflict. The main character is involved in a conflict that is real for that time period. So it's going to be inspired by real life struggles that people were experiencing during that time period in history, but it's going to be made up. So inspired by it, but not 100% true. Common themes: oppression, injustice, inequality, wartime. That definitely works for this week. We will be talking a little bit more about theme later, so make sure that you pay attention to that. Historical fiction is one of my favorite genres personally because it is based on a real time period in history, but it's fictional, so it allows you to kind of get an inside look based on true events, an inside look at what someone might have been experiencing or feeling during that time period. All right, let's talk about summarizing. Summarizing is not a new skill for any of you. This is something that you have learned before 5th grade and that we have practiced throughout 5th grade. Before we get started talking about it, I need to remind you that summarizing can look a little bit different depending on whether you are looking at something that's fiction or nonfiction. The strategy that works best is going to be different depending on if what you're reading is fictional or if it's nonfiction. What we are looking at right now is an example of a great strategy for fictional reading, okay? So why are we looking at this? Because what we're reading this week is an example of fiction, historical fiction. Somebody wanted but so then. We had an anchor chart in our classroom that had this exact thing on it, and it had little squares over to the side where we could put post-it notes up to fill in those spaces. So you have to answer each one of these little questions. Who is the somebody? What did they want? What was the but? What was the so? What was the then? So let's start with the somebody. I will say right now, before we really start with this, if you have not read Shipped Out in your Wonders workbook for this week, you might want to pause the video right now and go read it. Why? Because none of this will make any sense if you haven't read the story yet. If you haven't read the story, you need to go read it so that this will make sense. Of course, you can come back and watch this again later, but it will make more sense if you read it first. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk it through. Who is the main character? So in Shipped Out, the main character's name is Libby Kendall. Libby Kendall is a child who is living through World War II, whose life is being affected by the war. What does she want? What does the character want, or what is the character's goal? For this story, this is a little bit complex. I would say that what she wants has to do with her feelings. It has to do with what she can and can't control. For this one, you're going to need to really look at the story and do a little bit of inferencing. Think about what she's saying, about what is out of her control, what she wants to happen, what she doesn't want to happen, and how she's feeling about things. Then you get to the but. What is the problem in the story, or what is keeping the character from his or her goal? Sorry, I cannot talk. Okay, so once again, a little bit complex, a little bit complicated. Once you figure out what it is that she wants, then you need to think about what's keeping that from happening. So the problem is going to be what's happening in the story. It's going to be a little bit of the setting. What problem is the whole country facing at that point in time? That's kind of the big problem. Then I want you to bring it down to her level. A child whose father is fighting overseas in a war, whose mother is having to go work more than what she normally would, who's having to help her aunt with her job. Think about how that problem is affecting her and how it's affecting what she wants, what she is feeling, and what her goal is. That brings us to the so. What is the solution to the problem, or how does the character reach his or her goal? So what solves her problem? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the problem itself, the big problem that the whole country is facing, ends in this story. But how does the character, how does Libby Kendall get to where she feels a little bit differently, or her feelings are about what's going on are resolved? Think about it that way. Then you get to the then, how does the story end? Well, if you're looking at a plot roller coaster, where does it leave us? How is Libby Kendall feeling? What's going on in her life at that point in time? Where does it leave us? In this situation with Shipped Out, this example of historical fiction, the somebody wanted but so then requires you to think about the main character's feelings, what's happening in history at that point in time, and how it's impacting her on a personal level. Okay? So it does require you to do some deep thinking. If you're struggling with that, put yourself in her shoes. Think about how you would feel if you were in that exact situation, and it might help you make it more real life. Okay, let's talk about theme and main idea together. The page that we are looking at right now should look familiar to you if you were at school on Friday, March 13th. This should look familiar if you were at school that day, because this is the last thing that I passed out to you to glue into the front section of your reading notebook. So if you were there, this should be the last thing that was in your table of contents and the last page that's glued into that front section, because we were planning to talk more about theme and main idea the week after that. The week that we didn't come back before spring break, that was the plan. So, since we didn't get to do that, we're going to talk a little bit more about it right now. So if you have your notebook, if you want to open it, you can. If you just want to look at what's on the screen, that's fine too. So let's talk about what main idea and theme are. Main idea means most important point. It is topic related and text specific, meaning it is only for the one specific text that you are looking at, regardless of whether it's fiction or nonfiction. That is the definition of main idea. Theme, on the other hand, is a life lesson. It's generic. It's life related and not text specific, meaning it could apply in other areas of life or with other text. This week, we're focusing more on theme. In your Wonders workbook, it's going to ask you more about theme, ask you what you're supposed to be learning, what life lessons or takeaways you can take from the Shipped Out story. But I want to use this week as an opportunity to show you the difference between the two and help you to understand that a little bit better. So we've talked about how main idea is very specific to the text. If you are going to tell me about something about Libby this week, our main character from Shipped Out, if you are telling me something specific about her, it's probably going to apply to main idea. If you're going to tell me a main point about her and what's going on with her in the story, that's going to be main idea. It's specific. It refers to this story and this story alone. On the other hand, life lesson, a theme from Shipped Out, would not involve anything about Libby. Why? Because you don't know Libby. Libby is not a real person. You can't apply anything about her to your life or anybody else's life or any other text, because she only exists in this specific story. Okay? So if you're telling me specific details about the character or plot events from this story, it has to be part of main idea or a supporting detail for main idea. A theme is going to be more generic, something you can apply to your life, I can apply to mine, or that could also be found in other stories or text. Okay, so main idea and theme can both be found in nonfiction and fiction. Typically, you see more main idea test questions for nonfiction and more theme questions for fiction most of the time. So main idea usually pairs well with nonfiction, theme usually pairs well with fiction, but a text could have one, the other, or both. In a few minutes, we will go over your extra assignment page that's in your packet for this week, and that assignment has both. So you'll see an example of that in a few minutes. So main idea versus theme. Main idea is the most important point. These are some sentence stems that could start you off on describing the main idea. Themes are life-related lessons. Examples could be never give up, do your best, be honest, family is important, don't take people for granted, anything of that nature. Let's talk about a couple of examples. Nonfiction example. Main idea. The main idea was that hunter-gatherers encounter many dangers while traveling to find food. A theme that could be brought from that nonfiction example, which we don't have, we aren't reading it, but we can assume that it's about hunter-gatherers, is to be brave in the face of danger. A fiction example, this is once again from a text that we have not read, but let's just look at it anyway. This text was about a girl who had to rescue her family, so that is specific to whatever passage involves a girl rescuing her family. The theme was that sacrifices must be made in order to save others. Hopefully you can see that these 2 points would be specific to the passage that you are reading about a hunter-gatherer or hunter-gatherers and about a girl who's rescuing her family. This you would not apply to your life unless you are a hunter-gatherer or unless you're a girl who's rescuing her family and that all the details are exactly the same, which would not happen. That's not realistic. Themes, being brave in the face of danger, and sacrifices must be made in order to save others, these are lessons that you could apply to your life. There are probably times that you've had to be brave in a dangerous time or situation, or in a time that you felt like you were in danger. There are times that you've probably had to make sacrifices, or you've watched the people around you give up things in order to help others or to save others. So hopefully you can kind of see the difference between the two. In just a second, we're going to flip over and look at our theme versus main idea page for this week, and we'll continue talking. Okay, so let's take a look at your extra assignment page for this week. You have 2 different passages, a passage 1 and a passage 2. The directions are the same for both. It says to read the passage, find the main idea and the theme of the passage. Highlight the sentences that best support your main idea and theme. So tip number 1, I highly suggest that you take 2 markers, 2 flare pens, 2 highlighters, whatever that you would like, 2 different colors. Make one of them theme, one of them main idea. So use one color for theme, use one color for main idea. That way, when you're highlighting or underlining in the passage, you can clearly see the difference between the sentences that support your main idea and the sentences that support your theme. I would also highly suggest looking for one at a time. If you're trying to look for both at the same time, you are asking to get confused, okay? I can't think about both at the same time. I have to start with one and then move to the other. I cannot do both at the same time. You shouldn't try it either. So let's look at passage 1. If you read the whole thing, you will see it is a fictional passage about this child having some conflict with his siblings and the mom's responses to the conflict that's happening, the continuous conflict. So you have 2 questions. What is the main idea? Hint, who and what the story is about. And then what is the theme of the story? And it says the message, and it has theme in a bold font, kind of making that stand out to you and reminding you that theme is the message or the life lesson that can be taken from the story. You can either answer number 1 first or number 2. It really doesn't matter. If you're looking for the main idea, who and what the story is about, I would look up at the passage, pick your color for main idea, go through, and highlight the main points about who the story is about and what it's about. So who is your main character? what is going on with that main character. After you've highlighted it, take a second and think about somebody wanted but so then, write out your main idea. Number 2, what is the theme of the story? Take your color for theme, go into the passage, highlight what you think stands out as being the message. This might remind you of situations in your own home or in your own life where maybe somebody, could be you, could be a sibling, could be a friend, keeps getting in trouble for the same thing, keeps giving the same excuse. It's not really working. There is a problem. So think about that as you read and think about what kind of theme you could take away from that, what life lesson. Use 2 different colors, make the theme stand out, make the main idea stand out. Okay, let's look at the second passage. Same thing, you have another fictional story. It's asking you the main idea, it's asking you the theme. I would stick with the same strategy, stick with the same colors, one for main idea, one for theme. Start with whichever one is probably easier for you and go through and highlight your supporting details for your main idea and highlight the sentences that make the theme or the life lesson stand out to you. I will tell you that there is no direct answer key for me to email out to your parents or for me to provide as a resource for your parents, not for you, but for your parents. So if you do have questions about this, have your parents directly email me and I can answer those questions and help lead them to the correct answers that they can be looking for in your work. Hopefully this helps you with being able to see the difference and helping you to practice looking for both theme and main idea. I am currently on page 98 of your Wonders Workbook. I decided to go ahead and start with this page for our walkthrough, not because you have to complete this web. You do not have to complete this. You don't have to answer this question, but I do want to talk about this essential question and what's going on in the photograph over here, because I feel like it's actually super relevant to what's going on right now with the coronavirus, with the COVID-19 quarantine, with our whole life situation right now in America and all over the world with this pandemic. So the essential question says, how do different groups contribute to a cause? So how do different groups of people, different demographics, women, men, kids, young adults, older adults, different job occupations, how do they contribute and work together for a specific cause? So it says when the United States joined the fight in World War II, people all over the country were called on to make contributions to the war effort. Many factories stopped making their usual products and started to make equipment that was needed more, such as airplanes. So you might be thinking, okay, how does that have anything to do with the coronavirus pandemic? Well, we're not at war right now. We don't necessarily need airplanes, but think about it. Right now, different stores and factories and whatnot are being shut down. And part of what's happening as a result of that, some of the factories that were making other types of products are now making products that are important for what's going on right now during the pandemic. So there are some factories that are now making protective gear for our medical people, the people in the medical field. There are factories that are having to kind of double down on cleaning supplies, Clorox wipes, hand sanitizer, toilet paper, right? Maybe they didn't make that before, but they're making it now to meet the demand for it. You might see people in your own house, in your life, that are doing something a little bit different now in response to the pandemic. Your parents might be making masks, homemade masks. And that might be something that they weren't doing before, but they're doing it now, and that's their contribution to the cause of helping people protect themselves during this pandemic. So oddly enough, this is kind of relevant to what we have going on right now. We're not at war. We're not in a war with other countries, but we are battling a virus. So this does actually kind of apply to what's going on with us right now. So I just wanted to point that out. Let's go ahead and take a look at our story. Over here, for taking notes, it says, that it wants you to preview the text, pay attention to genre characteristics. So we've already talked about historical fiction and some of the special things that apply to that. They want you to make a prediction about the narrator, Libby Kendall. They want you to read the title, the essential question, look at the illustrations, and think about what your prediction is going to be. So don't skip to the end of the story and read it, because then that ruins your ability to make a prediction. But just kind of look at what's going on this first page, do a quick little look at the second page, and make a prediction. Make note of interesting words, key details. That's pretty much the same every week. You're going to number your paragraphs just like we've been doing in the past. Our first question has to do with theme in paragraphs 1 and 2 over here. What information supports the idea that different people can contribute to a cause? Underline the text evidence, write your answer here. So they are putting it out there that a possible theme is that different groups of people, different types of people can help with a common cause. They can come together, work together. They want you to show or prove that theme in the first 2 paragraphs. So underline it or highlight it over here, and then write what information supports that theme or that idea. Then in paragraphs 3 through 5, they want you to summarize. So that's that somebody wanted but so then. Circle the key details that describe Libby's work. Summarize it here. So this isn't as much, you don't have to do a full somebody wanted but so then. That applies more to summarizing an entire story, but they want you to circle the key details about her work and then make a short summary. So don't list all of it, but kind of bring those key details together to tell us in a short description what Libby is doing, what her work involves. Author's craft. This story uses a first-person point of view. How does that affect the mood of the story? So first person from Libby Kendall's perspective. She is telling the story as she sees it as a child during World War II. Think about how that affects the mood. Think about, as a child, how it must feel to be living in the middle of a major war. How that would be different from maybe an adult's perspective, because an adult would handle that a little bit differently. Just something to ponder and think about. Okay, second page. I'm not going to directly number it, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. You should number it in your workbook on your pages. Paragraphs 1 through 3, 1, 2, and 3. Flashback. Ooh, okay, so sometimes in stories, they give us what's called a flashback, to where the character is thinking back on something that has happened in the past. Just like we have flashbacks, sometimes something that's happening might remind us of something in our past, and it causes us to stop and think about it for a minute. That's what's happening in paragraphs 1 through 3. So you're going to circle the clues that show that Libby is thinking about an earlier time. I'll go ahead and give you one. I remember. If you're remembering, you're thinking back on something in the past. So any clues that show that she's thinking about a past event or an earlier time. Paragraph 3, theme. They want you to underline the evidence that shows the change in her behavior after she learns her dad is joining the Navy. So how does her behavior change? Underline that text evidence. You can also underline where she's experiencing a physical change, how she's physically reacting to that information about her dad. Paragraph 4, we're summarizing again. Summarize how she responds to her feelings. So here you need to think about what she does based on her new feelings about what's happening with her dad. Author's craft. Why did the author include the flashback in the story? Just think about that. Imagine if the flashback wasn't there, how the story would be different or what information would be missing. Okay, the last page. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs that you should number on your paper. Paragraphs 1 and 2, we're looking at theme. How does Aunt Lucia try to cheer up Libby? What effect does this have? So over here, what is her aunt doing? And what effect does it have? How does Libby have a change in behavior or attitude? Paragraphs 2 all the way through 5. Homophones. Underline context clues that help you distinguish the meanings of sale, S-A-L-E, and sale, S-A-I-L. How convenient. This was on our poster earlier in the video, so that works out. You're going to write what each one means, so I already kind of gave those away for you, but you do need to go back and underline the clues that help you to see the difference in their meanings, even if I hadn't already told you. Author's craft. What message does the author give readers through Libby's actions? So what message or life lesson can you take based on the way that Libby is acting? What can you learn from her? And then over here, they want you to summarize. So this is where the somebody wanted but so then would be really helpful. I would really like for you to try to do this to make sure that you can. I know you all can, but make yourself do it because practice makes perfect and it will make you better at summarizing. So make sure that you do that. Okay, quick look at our vocabulary. Nothing new here. Same as it's been the past few weeks. Use the context clues that are given to you to understand the meaning and then apply it to the questions. A little bit more about homophones. Gives you another description. Gives you an example from the text evidence. And then it gives you a turn to practice yourself. So if you go to page 101, you have need and need. And you need to use the context clues to write the meaning of each. Same thing for read and read on page 102. So be sure that you do that. If you were to keep going, as always, you have more practice pages, more activities that go with the story. You can choose to explore those or you can choose to be done for the week. Totally up to you. That's a wrap on week 5. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you have extra questions, comments, concerns, please either drop it in the comments or shoot me an email. I have one more big special request before I sign off for this week. If you have books from our classroom library, books that have my name stamped somewhere in them, please make sure that you go ahead and start gathering those, getting them together to be returned when your parents are notified that they are to come to school and return things and pick up things that belong to you. Even if you didn't actually check the book out, if you accidentally took it home without checking it out, I still really need it back. This is important because we want our future 5th graders to be able to enjoy the library just as much as you all have. So if you could please do that, I would really appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you next week.